Hello, everybody, and good morning. I'm Lena Soh-Ng from Distilleri. Thank you for joining us today at the at the PRCA Southeast Asia Global Comms Forum 2021. Well, this year has got off to an exciting start, hasn't it? Definitely looking at the eco survey that was conducted in August and September, I just want to highlight that generally the results were of optimism for this year, especially in these areas. CEOs are taking corporate reputation seriously, with ethics and corporate purpose at the top of the agenda. Clients are using PR to lead non-traditional services, and there's plentiful supply of talent. So this is augurs well for our industry. And today we have the PRCA to thank for taking us through some of the new trends for this year. I also want to say special thanks to Tara Muniz, who has been working hard behind the scenes to make this possible for us. Industry leaders, as they debate and glimpse onto the future, these are the people that I would be introducing in the next 2.5 hours. So following me, there's Tracy Liu from One Faber Group, who will be hosting panelists from Cognito and REDHILL. Kit from Pan Pacific unfortunately sends her regrets. Something came up at the last minute. Well, as I said, industry has got off to a roaring start. At 11 o'clock, we have Lars Voedisch, who is MD of Precious Comms, and he's going to talk about why Southeast Asia's rise matters so much to communicators. We then take a 5-minute break, and at 11:20, the growing role of internal comms will be a discussion that comes from Shonali Chakravarty, who is the APAC head of the Lenovo data center group. And last but not least, at 11:40 will be a panel hosted by Amanda Lee, who is Director of Prospect Resourcing. And she has senior professionals in our industry from Sinclair Comms, H&K, and SOJERN. So before I hand over to Tracy, just a quick note. Remember that there's a Q&A box in your screen. Please put your questions there for your panel or your panelists or your speakers. Over to you, Tracy.
Morning and welcome to the first panel for today's session. Today we have a very esteemed panel joining us from the agency side. We have Emma Pickering. She's the Director and Head of Client Services at Cognito. She is an experienced PR practitioner who has worked at both large network agencies and specialist boutiques in Singapore and London. She specializes in integrated communications campaigns and providing crisis support for corporate financial services and tech clients. Joining her, we have Pranav Rastogi. He is the MD of REDHILL Communications. He is a senior comms practitioner and runs a global PR agency with clients across the tech, finance, lifestyle, and government sectors. So both of you are from the agency side. So I happen to be on the client side, but I do have some PR agency experience in the earlier years of my career. So I'll try to sort of balance the viewpoints for both of you with some perspectives from the client side. As today we have our audience representing both sides. Okay, so let's start the first topic that we want to cover today. Amidst an environment which has been very challenging for us starting last year, February around this time. So we're almost a year into the pandemic. And I think the industry has changed so much against very tough business challenges, as well as the increasing pressures on PR to drive this recovery, slow recovery that we are all working towards. So we want to discuss today how PR will play a central role in brand building as corporates and brands try to sort of gain attention and fight for their share in a very crowded and challenging environment with marketing budgets that have been slashed, and how PR can help brands navigate towards that. that normalcy and recovery. So maybe I'll start off with Emma first. Maybe from your point of view, what do you think PR should be driving and its role that it will play?
Thanks, Tracy, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. So when we look at the role that public relations will play in brand building, and especially as we come towards the new normal or whatever that new normal at this point is, it's also important to look at the current environment and that environment outside of PR as well. So 2020 has had a really wide-ranging impact. We're all feeling it right now. But it's really key to note that trust in brands, as well as the media, whether NGOs, governments, businesses, is at an all-time low. And we saw that in the latest Edelman Trust Barometer, which was recently released. So arguably, our ability to build trust has never been more important. Whatever organization you're working for, there's a job to be done there. Coming from my side, when we're looking at corporate clients, we know at the moment that from the Edelman Trust Barometer that businesses are ranking higher than, for example, NGOs, government, and the media in terms of trust. But real credibility for CEOs is declining. So for many of our clients, that means PR is now becoming a boardroom discussion point. We're no longer seen as that external arms and legs support service. We've got CEOs looking at what our client counterparts on the PR and marketing side are doing, and really looking at how PR joins together holistically, with all of those other facets of business to play really that key role in brand building at the moment. So, this is great news for us. We've always wanted PR to be taken more seriously, and we're really seeing that escalate at the moment. And it's great to be, speaking with those high-level people and having that seat at the table. So, for what we're really focusing on for 2021 is working very, very closely with our branding teams, our marketing teams, our clients, to provide really sharp counsel and guidance, because while we're heading towards this new normal, there's so much that is changing. And I feel like a lot of our clients really in 2020 took quite a conservative and considered approach to their PR and communications. I think there's a real understanding of clients that they cannot be tone deaf in this environment. We've really got to marry our campaigns with sentiment, with changes, whether it's kind of societal changes, government mandated changes as well. So there's a real need to be, aware of the position we're trying to communicate and how that might impact those who are receiving it. So for example, even down to making sure that when our clients are issuing photos with press releases, other people in those photos, conforming with the latest government regulations. Are they 1 meter away from each other? Are they wearing masks? So helping our clients to avoid any potential slip-ups there. But I think also really crucially, what we're going to see throughout 2021 is there's no longer this ability to just join, for example, a social media wave. We saw the Black Lives Matter movement gain real traction last year, but for a lot of brands were called out for maybe just posting that blacked out square on Instagram, but not actually making an impact within their organizations as well. So, as we move towards the new normal and helping to build brands, there's a real, I'd summarize by saying there's a real opportunity for PR teams to work closer with CEOs, with the C-suite than ever before. But we must be aware of the implications of what we're putting out into the world as part of our campaigns.
Thanks, Emma. I think you raised some very good points. On the topic of building trust and credibility, I think in recent times, surveys have shown that there is an increasing distrust in social media with the spread of misinformation and fake news, as well as a distrust of the media, the mainstream media, where I think the US particularly has been facing a lot of political turmoil, so it's more prevalent there. Pranav, what are your thoughts on this, on how we can use PR to start to regain trust and credibility with the consumers in this very tough environment?
Sure. I think one of the key things, and it was funny, I just saw a headline, yesterday, that plague of mistrust follows COVID-19, and people are losing the trust in the media, especially I think the two markets that they wrote the most, where the trust is reduced the most were in the US and China. So there's obviously been this huge thing about people lacking trust in what's being said by what was traditionally called a more credible source of information. And I think the biggest thing that's perpetuated that is the rise of social media platforms. When you're able to jump on a platform like Twitter and communicate to millions of people, and when a person in certain positions of power are able to do that, who traditionally would be relatively well trusted for example, the president of the USA. I think when you're able to use that platform to convey, what are clear falsehoods and have those come across and reach a large group of people in that way, I think it becomes a very dangerous situation where it's extremely hard to then build trust with people who start believing more fringe media or more alternate theories or just blatant falsehoods. So I think the bigger question here is how can PR sort of bring that power back towards credibility, and how can we ensure that we are being credible throughout as we all sort of recover and move towards whatever this new normal is in 2021 and onwards. Just going back to one of the points that you had brought up earlier, I think one of the key things that people have noticed, and we've all noticed, is that when a pandemic hits and when companies have significant revenue losses in some cases, the first thing that tends to go is marketing budget, right? Marketing communications budget. I think as agency people, we know that all too well, and as client, Tracy, I'm sure you can confirm that on the client side.
Definitely.
I think one of the first things that gets cut, unfortunately, is marketing budget, or pause marketing comms, in some cases even, unfortunately, laying off teams. So I think one of the big things that we'll see going forward is how when companies start spending and bringing in some of those revenues, how do they format and how do they form their marketing teams and their comms teams? I think we'll see everything being much more integrated. I think we'll start seeing PR start being included in the way that a company looks at meeting its business objectives and trying to achieve its goals and grow its revenue over the next few years. We'll start seeing that a lot more than we're seeing in the past. And I think we're going to touch upon this a little bit more going forward. But I think that sort of centers this whole discussion about, okay, if PR is going to be this huge part in driving a company's growth and being directly linked in some ways to driving growth, how do you then make sure that you're communicating transparently in an environment where people are trusting what traditional media is saying less and less? How do you make sure you're communicating transparently, you're communicating your messages without any hidden sort of secrets or any sort of hidden agendas behind that? And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that the biggest challenge that we'll have to face going forward. I think to Emma's point earlier about how brands were just putting token sort of gestures and messages out about specific events. Just for example, it was Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s day yesterday 2 days ago, and traditionally celebrated in the US. And because of technology, because maybe a few years ago you couldn't sort of call out brands and you couldn't check on what brands were doing, and you see a message and you say, oh yeah, it's this brand's values are aligned with mine. I think because of technology, it's quite easy to go and see and to call out brands and to actually check whether they're just statements that they're making or whether there's actually action following up the statements that they're making. So that's going to be, I think technology also adds an interesting feature to this. You can't get away nowadays just by saying something. People will call you out if you're not following that through. So that's going to be something interesting to look at, in 2021 as well.
Thanks, Pranav, for your insights. Coming from a client side, I definitely want to confirm about the increasing pressure that in-house marketers are, to actually cut marketing spend while delivering greater results in tandem with the falling revenue that most companies are facing, especially in the industry I am in, that is been greatly impacted by tourism. So yes, I continuously have to justify the size of my teams and really try to cross-train them to become not just a PR comms person, but to understand how social media and content building is also an extension of that skill set that traditional PR comms people have. So I just wanted to sort of ask your opinion on how agencies sort of fit into that role of complementing what in-house marketers have, and really truly showing clients that you are giving a very, very strong results in terms of driving the business recovery than just using PR coverage. I know we'll cover that later in terms of how we define success, but maybe we can just start the conversation here around that topic. Emma, do you wanna have a go? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So when we are reporting back to a lot of our clients, people are still, particularly if they've got somebody above them in the organization who doesn't understand the value of PR, are still asking us for a lot of metrics as well. And I know we'll touch on the metrics side of things in a minute. But really, what we're looking at when we want to build trust and credibility is looking at, of course, we want outcomes from our media coverage or our profile. We want people to call up the client and to get those direct leads. And that for us, happens so rarely. I know Tracy's got a great example of this that I can share later, but, really, we've got to kind of measure how the client is being perceived when we go through campaigns. So we tend to, at Cognito, at the start of an outset of campaign, we'll undertake sentiment analysis. We'll ask journalists what they think, of the client. And then at the end of the campaign, have tracked and measured how those relationships have changed. Do they find what the client has been saying as credible? Do they find their spokespeople credible as well? Do they trust in the organization? And while it's not a perfect science, it does in most cases at least help us to understand how we're moving the needle, so to speak, on the client's profile and the levels of trust within a client. But obviously for PR, it's never really an exact science. We're just trying to put some of those metrics or some of those measurements in place at the outset and at the end of some of our campaigns or outreach as well.
I think from my experience in terms of brand building, I think, of course, everyone wants to sort of, get their brand across much stronger, especially in this difficult environment. But I think protecting the brand is the other side of it that, I think PR agencies are in a position to really add value, especially now when we are operating in a year-long and even more, sort of crisis that we're all living through. So maybe Pranav, you want to talk about how, personally or at your agency, you're helping clients with that in terms of crisis preparedness and crisis management?
Sure. Before I get into it, I just want to touch upon one other point that Emma was talking about earlier. So I think one of the key things that we'll note going forward, in light of companies maybe streamlining teams and deploying their resources in more careful ways, for lack of a better word. I think a key feature we'll see is how well an agency, we'll see a bit of a change in how an agency and in-house team will have to operate. I think we'll start seeing in-house teams relying on agencies slightly more, not just for the traditional sort of media pitching and reporting and things like that, but also just for maybe even managing some internal comms related things. Maybe even bringing on the PR agencies to work on other bigger brand campaigns or other campaigns that they would traditionally look at maybe slightly different social media agencies or other brand agencies as well. I think we'll start seeing the PR teams essentially form an extension of the in-house marketing team in a way that is much more pronounced to what we're currently seeing. Kind of like how a lot of startups work in the early stage, where there might be sort of a COO or CEO who's looking at PR but doesn't have time to really handle most of the work, right? So you kind of bring them on as your comms and marketing team. I think we'll start seeing a lot of larger brands also do that. So the process and the relationship will be much stronger and much more involved. Going to the question about crisis management and how we work with clients, especially during this sort of last year or so. I think one of the key things was that everyone kind of realized that at different points, I think in some ways we kind of saw it relatively early in Singapore. We kind of saw that, okay, this has a potential for something big to happen. So even though a lot of our clients, and in many cases a lot of people internally as well, were like, it seems like it's fairly small. It's not gonna, it's gonna blow away. There isn't any chance for Singapore to go in lockdown or anything like that. Unfortunately, I think, well, fortunately, I guess we saw it with one of our clients who had manufacturing in China very early, so in December and January. So we kind of had to get involved with crisis management at a very early stage. So I think that helped us just be a lot more prepared, and we proactively went to all our clients and said, hey, this can be a serious matter, and you need to be prepared for XYZ. Here are some scenarios that we have to prepare for. Here are things that could happen. We work very closely with their business teams to, in case we knew that unfortunately there was going to be, a loss of revenue for a company and they might have to lay off people. We had to work with them much in advance to make sure that that's being communicated effectively. So definitely, I think the main thing is just being prepared. Trying to plan for different scenarios, even if that means a lot of extra work and preparing for scenarios that may not happen. In a crisis situation, if you're prepared and if you have, suggested sort of pathways of how to work, if one of many situations happen, I think it just saves you a lot of time and helps you communicate much faster when the crisis actually hits.
Yeah, Pranav, that's exactly what we did during the downtime. At One Faber Group, we actually worked with our PR agency to develop crisis statements for different scenarios that we would never have the time to do in a normal BAU scenario. But we said, okay, this time is the best time to level up everyone's skill set in that area, because it is something that again is more strategic, takes a bit more planning and thinking, and also working with other stakeholders within the company to come up with the scenario. So for example, we worked with our ops team to devise, or rather to come up with a scenario that would be something that we should be prepared for as part of our crisis preparedness. So I think that was something that I saw in terms of value add from the agency that we currently work with. Okay.
I'll just add one more point. I think, again, Emma mentioned earlier about how CEOs and people higher up in the management are also asking questions and seeing the effectiveness and seeing what PR can deliver, especially during these last few months. So I think coming back to this whole thing about crisis as well, I think you're starting to see a lot more acceptance of having the comms head or marketing head in the room when these crisis situations are being when potential business crisis or business decisions are being made as well. So then that can be, fed down and managed in a communications sense as well. So I think anything like this that can add, that comms head to the table, or add that, the PR agencies involved in that conversation, is always going to be good for how brands can communicate.
Yeah, and to add to that, because my stakeholders actually were part of that discussion in preparing or fine-tuning the crisis statements, they saw the value that the PR agency brought to the table because they saw them working, right? Normally, it's the in-house marketer that has that very close relationship with the agency, but this time, the other stakeholders had that visibility and saw the value add. So again, sort of just showing how we are really helping the business during this critical time. Emma, do you have any examples you want to share with us?
Yeah, I would say, it's really interesting. And as Pranav said, that preparedness is absolutely key. But my hope for 2021 as well is, as, PR takes a bigger seat at the table, is that clients won't be as sort of shy to bring the agency in, to the crisis at the late stage that we are sometimes brought in as. I know as practitioners, Pranav's nodding, we will all have been brought in that stage when the proverbial has already hit the fan, and you're trying to bring everything together and minimize what is happening. So I hope that, when businesses start to see potential crises evolving, as their education of into PR increases, as they're more used to working with an agency or with their in-house counterpart at a higher level, that there'll be more opportunity to be brought in at an earlier stage and to stop some of these issues escalating, to what they have previously. So for a lot of clients, very similar to Pranav, we've been doing a lot of preparedness work as well. As you said, Tracy, in a bit of that downtime, looking at some more scenario planning. Also looking at the very real new scenarios that this new normal, so to speak, actually presents us with. They're unlike a lot of crisis management scenarios we'd have ever had to scope for before. So it's really, keep making sure you're taking that crisis Bible out, blowing the dust off it regularly throughout 2021. And, being prepared for the unusual.
Yeah, great. I'll just move on to the next topic, which I'm sure is something that, our peers are also wondering in this new normal. How do you think success in the work that we do will be measured, and not just the usual PR value, which we usually do, and show the client, and the client shows the boss, like, I achieved X amount of PR value. I got you this coverage in, XX magazine. How do you think we can really show ourselves to really deserve that seat on the table that we keep talking about, and showing that we're driving the business recovery in this new world. Pranav, do you want to start?
Sure. This is you know, the age-old question is, how do you show success and how do you measure success? Look, I think there's going to be a change in the way that maybe it'll be forced by sort of the clients onto the agencies, but I think there'll definitely be a change in the way that agencies are going to measure success and report back success. Part of this is, you know, as I said earlier, there's a change in how budgets are going to be spent, and people will start looking at having budgets tied to some levels of success, and success tied to business objectives. So I think we're going to start seeing, you know, more people try and say that, okay, look, here's my business challenge. How can you help solve this with communications? And if you come back and say that, you know, I'll get you 6 pieces in, you know, in Singapore media, the client's just going to say, well, that's great, but, you know, it's not going to help me in any way, right? So you have to formulate, you know, you have to start talking about other pieces of information or other metrics that go beyond just that. You have to start talking about, okay, so how am I going to change the sentiment about this? How am I going to build share of voice? How am I going to build, you know, end understanding in sort of a consumer's mind? So we'll have to start going deeper, and we'll have to start looking at measuring and finding ways to measure different aspects. We'll have to look at more data, more analytics. But as I say this, I just want to also caution everyone. I think data and analytics is great, but here's the problem with it, right? I'll give you an analogy from sports. Tracy and I'm not sure if you are football fans, but you know, in case you've ever watched or are sort of avid football fans, or even if you're a casual fan, you know, at the end of the game, you'll see like you'll see the score, and you'll see, okay, you know, the data and stats that are available, sort of score, shots on target, shots off target, possession, you know, maybe fouls, yellow cards. So basic information, right? And this is how football information was displayed for years. And I think you can draw the, you know, obvious analogy for this is how PR agencies and PR and comms used to be reported for years. So, but what does that information actually tell you, right? So if you say that, yeah, we had 60% of the ball and we took 20 shots, does that mean that you deserve to win the game? Does that mean you played better? Does that mean your possession was effective? Does that mean the quality of your shots were good? No, it doesn't. It just states that you had 20 shots on 60% of the ball. What if all those shots were from 30 yards away? So analogy, what if all those pieces of coverage that you got were on, you know, blogs that only 10 people read, but you can still reporting that I have 30 pieces of coverage, but, you know, it doesn't really help the end client or make a dent in the result. And I think you start seeing changes in how sports are also displaying information and bringing in analytics. So for other football fans, or, you know, if both of you are football fans as well, you start looking at expected goals. You start looking at expected assists. You start looking at you know, data and analytics that can add a little more value and add a little more information. But again, on its own, it's still a little meaningless, and you have to start connecting it back to the flow of the game. You have to start connecting it to the context of what's actually happening. So the caution that I want to give everyone is just to say that, look, stats are great, data is great. If you don't know how to infer any insights from them, if you don't know how to bring in any sort of analysis, or bring in or use it for like to map out and to connect it to what's actually happening, the context of what's happening, then they serve sort of little to maybe no use. So it's really important to ask those right questions, and then to try and find information and data that can support, you know, support the sort of conclusions that you think might be there, and then to try and, you know, build all of those together into one cohesive sort of analysis of what's happening. And you can't just rely on one specific stat to use that as a success. And I think that's going to be something that will take a long time to change, but something we'll start seeing changing, you know, as we go into 2021 and onwards.
Great. Well, we have some questions coming in already, so I guess our audience is really being engaged about what we're discussing here. Emma, do you have anything to add to this topic?
I do indeed. I think PR practitioners can talk endlessly about measurement.
Yes.
And,
age-old question, yeah.
I think we can talk endlessly about anything.
So true. So when it comes to measurement, you know, very much in line with what Pranav was saying, right? It's not about one specific measurement anymore, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we're still seeing and what I would love to see from clients in 2021 and how the PR agency works with them. So, you know, from our experience with working with a lot of corporate clients, the classic measurements, so we're saying reach, frequency, share of voice are constantly being asked for from clients. And we know a lot of the time that our clients themselves understand that those measurements aren't representative, but they've got somebody above them who doesn't fundamentally understand that PR is a tricky thing to measure, and they're just trying to grasp at anything that they can possibly do that demonstrates why they should still be continuing to spend money on PR and to justify, you know, the agency's existence and some of their role as well, which we completely understand. So we continue to measure in that way for some clients, but it's with heavy caveats. You know, I've got a client saying, oh, but the share of voice for this client is enormous this month. And I'm saying, well, this client had a huge crisis. That is not a positive metric to be measuring against, but yet it's causing your share of voice to drop. So when we are having to give these metrics, it's with big caveats, and, you know, it's constantly a no to AVE as well. You know, in this day and age when we're still asked to measure AVE, you know, we will just explain to the client why we're not. You know, but when we're looking at how we measure as well, I think it goes back to those points I was mentioning earlier about how we're moving the needle. Do those media now know our client well? Are they actively coming to our client, you know, for commentary or opportunities? So has that push from the agency turned into a pull from the media is one way that we can demonstrate, you know, some of that relationship building. You know, we've conducted interviews with our clients before to see how they feel about the brand, how it's developing, you know, going into these more, I guess, you know, it's not just numbers on a page, it's actual insights and going a bit deeper in that sense. So, but one thing I'd love to see throughout 2021, and one thing that we're working really hard to engage our clients on, is that high reach does not always mean high engagement. So our clients, you know, a lot of them will still be, and I know this will be the same for a lot of the people listening into this webinar as well, people will be wanting those high impact, high reach publications, but actually is that doing the job that you need? You know, as Pranav said with his football analogy, right? Does that, you know, you might have had those shots on target, but are they impactful? Is that doing the job that you need it to do for your clients as well? So, you know, we're constantly advising that it's really about the audience you want to reach and the topics you're talking about, and tailoring that media program accordingly, rather than just a scattered approach over a lot of different media. But also one really interesting thing we are seeing already, and I think we're going to continue to see throughout 2021 and advise clients on, is clients who are unknown in the market coming to us and saying, I want to do some thought leadership. And my counsel to them is, that's fantastic, but the media don't know you yet. You haven't built those relationships. So we can't come to you and give you a really successful thought leadership campaign if you haven't put the time in to build that profile, to get to know the landscape as well. So increasingly it means clients are coming to us with almost project-led pieces that then transition into retainers once they start to see the value of building those relationships with the media. I almost think of it as the foundations of the house. You've got to put those in strongly before you start adding the thought leadership and all of those you know, elements on top of it. And also, you know, going back to the crisis piece, the better we know the media, the better we have, you know, the better those relationships are on behalf of our clients. If we do enter into a crisis situation, the management of it becomes much more straightforward when we know the media and the media know our client as well. So building those relationships with our targets, with our audiences, for me is absolutely key. But, you know, saying that, I will still continue to provide the measurements that my clients require on the side.
Yes, it's very necessary, unfortunately, coming from an in-house person.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's move on to our next topic, which is about skill sets, right? As you know, the Singapore government has been telling everyone to sort of prepare for, you know, the new digital future. How do you think PR pros need to do? Do we need to be more technology savvy? What do we need to now form the relationships that you talked about virtually, because, you know, we can't so freely sort of meet a journalist over lunch or drinks anymore, right? We're sort of really communicating and interfacing primarily through virtual means. So Pranav, do you want to start?
I think when you talk about skills, you know, when you look at what the PR business is, it's a people's business, right? It's building relationships with people, it's building relationships with media, we're building relationships with journalists, and everything happens, you know, tends to happen in person. It's also building relationships with a team, you know, brainstorming, pushing your team to you know, come up with different ideas. So when you remove that social connection, and you remove that ability for your teams and people to meet in person, that removes, and that brings about a fairly large challenge, which essentially is, how do we create human connections via this medium of Zoom? So I'm talking to, I think, 113 people according to this, but I'm only seeing 2 other people here. I don't really see anyone else, and I'm hoping that I build some sort of maybe I share something that's useful to at least some percentage of them. But there's only so much there's only so much of this that you can do just by talking to people virtually. And I think one of the biggest challenges will be because Singapore is definitely along the way where people can start meeting up and go in groups of 8 and things like that. But Singapore is a bit of an anomaly in that sense. Many other countries across the world, and I think we all have businesses and sort of that operate across countries, across regions. And it is going to be very difficult to try and build relationships when you can't go to Japan and meet your client there and spend some time with them, with their decision makers. You can't travel to Australia to meet your clients there. So there are benefits to doing everything on Zoom, which is you save yourself the 8-hour flight there and back, and you save yourself probably a lot of money buying dinner and doing all these other things, and maybe get some more sleep. But I think on the other side, one thing that one advantage that it does have, and I think Emma will probably add on more to this. You mentioned something related to this yesterday. It's just, it has made it easier to connect with people who are further away from you. So that is definitely a big advantage. But I think net it's probably a large disadvantage. So it's good that we're able to connect with more people and do it easier. I think sort of we probably wouldn't have had a chance to do something like this. We probably would have tried to do this in person if this was a year ago rather than doing it virtually. But there's a limit to how much that can benefit. I think at some point you have to go and build a human connection with people, and you can't do that extremely effectively just over Zoom.
Emma, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree. So, our relationship building, as Pranav said, it's not a new skill, but we have to learn how to do it differently. And, one of the advantages I mentioned, to Pranav and Tracy yesterday was that Cognito has offices across the world, and I'm a relatively new joiner to the company. So I've had to get on board virtually for a lot of it. But now speaking to my colleagues in New York or San Francisco is absolutely no different to speaking to my team in Singapore. We're all doing video calls. So in some way, it really breaks down the barriers. It's encouraged me to get to know people or to have those conversations and meetings with people that maybe would have been a bit more siloed had we not been in this environment as well. But when we talk about, I guess, relationship building more broadly and the impact it will have and the skill set as well, it's a different skill to host a meeting over Zoom. Some of the pieces are the same, but some are slightly different. So, those skills, we need to instill those. We need to lead from the top with our team as well. So whether that's things like having, or, making sure if we can, we have our camera on to build that human connection. It's easier if I see somebody's facial reactions, their body language to something as well. If we are just, with our cameras off, that's a whole different ball game. And the skills even down to your time management, keeping those meetings short. If a meeting goes in for an hour, could we reduce that to half an hour? Could it have been an email? Could it have been a phone call in that sense? We've talked a lot about meetings, but could have been emails this year as well. But it's up to us to expand our skill set to recognize when those meetings are also appropriate and when those relationships do need to be extended by seeing somebody face to face. So that, that's been a really interesting piece throughout last year and something that will continue for a lot of the region into this year as well. But, when it comes to other skills that our teams need to be learning, one of the big skills for me is around the different use of data and analytics. We touched on it earlier into our results piece, but what tools are we using? Could we be using different tools that help our clients to measure or to report more effectively, or for us to media monitor or flag interesting pieces of coverage or news breaks that could help our clients in different ways? And how are we then presenting this data back to the client? Are there insights, tools, things we could use to present that data differently to not justify our existence, but show our results, show how those relationships are being built as well? So that would be my kind of key skill area for 2021, as well as continuing, I guess, to not, not let Zoom fatigue get the better of us. And my top tip there is basically not doing to the team is not doing anything on a Zoom call that you wouldn't do face to face. So don't be doing in the background. Stay engaged. This is an opportunity to build relationships, even if those relationships right now aren't face to face.
I just want to add two things to that. So I think one thing, it's quite funny when sometimes you have large calls with maybe like 20, 30 people, and there's only maybe 4 or 5 people who are talking on it. And when the call ends, and you sort of say, okay, actually, thanks, it's the end of the call, but like 2 or 3, people, can you just stay back because you have something else to discuss? And then you see, those 3 people are on the call and everyone else has left, except for 2 or 3 other people who are still there and haven't exited the call yet. And then you can tell, okay, these are the people who are not paying attention, minority paying attention. They probably are doing something else and they can't find the tab. They're not looking at the screen. But I think one more thing to add, and I think we I'm conscious of time. I know we want to keep some time for Q&A, but I think it's important to share this. I quite towards the start of the pandemic, I think it was sometime around March of or April. I listened to a Freakonomics podcast, which. If I'm not mistaken, the heading or the title of it was "How to Make Meetings Less Terrible," and I found a lot of great information there, which I just want to share a couple of pieces from there. I think one of the things that they shared, and I think is really true, is that work expands to whatever time is allocated to it. So if you have a meeting for 1 hour, you're probably going to spend that 1 hour discussing things. So if the calendar default is 30 minutes or 1 hour, but you don't actually need 30 minutes or 1 hour, schedule it for the time that you need. If you need 48 minutes for a meeting, schedule 48 minutes. You always find ways to sort of, plow in, because mentally you feel like you've kept that time aside for this discussion. So you end up, spending that time having conversations which may not be so relevant. So that's definitely one thing that I learned, try to implement. And I think the second thing is just, instead of starting a meeting with logistics, try to, spend the first few minutes connecting people in specific ways. So not just, how you guys doing, it's more sort of, okay, so, what's the best part of this week coming up for you? What's the biggest challenge this week? So try to connect people with more specific things. It'll help other people also stay more connected and more engaged. And I think those are 2 things that, I sort of took on board very, very early on. And I think they've been quite useful in, keeping myself and the teams and everyone else engaged and also more productive throughout these last few months.
Okay, thank you for those tips. I'll try to use them in my own meetings moving forward. Now we come to our last topic that I know both of you are quite passionate about, and this is something that has really been, brought to national attention. Definitely, it has taken its toll on our industry, and I'm talking about mental health, right? So perhaps we can talk about whether you think we'll see increased support for mental health in a particular industry, and how it might even become a budget line item, in how companies, help their employees who have gone through, very, very trying circumstances this year, and how the industry as a whole should support our PR pros, in adjusting to these changes of working from home, not being able to draw the line from work and home because they are working from home. Emma, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. As you say, it's a subject, both Pranav and I are hugely passionate about. I'd say here that a lot of the, setting the tone for your working culture, the support around mental health, while we would love to see an industry-wide change, it really is down to the specific agencies and those leaders within those agencies to really set the tone from the top. For particularly for our junior staff who may not have spent much time ever in the office and are suddenly having to do their entire job remotely, particularly those also who've been onboarded or have joined, during the pandemic. But just some of the things that we've been doing at Cognito, and I know are the same for a lot of my friends and my colleagues, from across the agency business, is really staying close to our colleagues whilst being further away. We can't physically see a lot of our colleagues, but our of real importance to them has been I have weekly one-on-ones with all of my team. We talk about anything from work to personal life. We're here as agency heads to listen and to understand what is going on in their lives as well. and particularly taking the time out with the younger team members or those who are new, to spend time with them, to get them up to speed, to just ask them how they are, is so crucial, because every day is so busy and so full on that we need to actually carve that time out to check in, with everybody around us. We've also started, a kind of concept of brutal honesty or brutal transparency. So not hiding things from each other, being quite open with how we're feeling, how things are going, and setting that tone from the top. But one thing that I think, and I think, a lot of people will probably be in agreement, is around our boundaries, both with clients and around our communications channels. Now we have email, Teams, Slack, Zoom, WhatsApp, Telegram, all of these things are constantly going on. And a lot of these platforms will have come into more prominence in your agency or in your organization at the start of the pandemic, as we sort of struggle to keep up with the working from home environment. Now, that means you can constantly be bombarded. Notifications from your clients, from your team over Slack. So really, I would say to a lot of those agency folks and client folks out there to really rationalize the channels that you're using. That can cause a huge mental load onto your employees. I certainly felt that, at some points throughout 2020 as well, that it really needs to be rationalized and controlled in that sense. And also setting boundaries with clients. As clients, for us as an agency, have come under more pressure, we find clients, WhatsApping us at odd hours. They're working strange hours as well, because now our home is our office, essentially. So we're never really away from it. So, as the senior people within an organization, can you set a time limit on when you should not reply to clients after a certain time, to make sure we're actually protecting our time and the time of those within our agencies as well? Obviously, if it's a crisis, that's a different story. But can that query wait till tomorrow? Is it really that urgent? And then sometimes the medium that query comes in on can have a big impact. So can we encourage clients to go via email rather than WhatsApp, because people feel compelled to have read and to have responded so quickly? So really, for me, it comes down to setting the tone from the top, looking after our client, our colleagues and our clients as well, having open, transparent conversations with them. They're struggling too. But really just being conscious of how much everyone around us is doing and the time that they are, the time and the environment in which they're doing it.
Pranav, what is REDHILL doing to help our, our people?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I want to touch upon here. I think, one of the biggest things is, like I said earlier, PR is a people's business, right? And when you cut off that social interaction, you cut off that ability of people to meet with each other and talk to each other on a daily basis in person. And then you go from that, almost overnight, to a situation where you are sharing a small workspace with 4 other people at home, or you have your siblings or parents, working from home or studying from home. It's not easy. It's not something that you can, easily transition to. And I think recognizing that is extremely important. I think we're recognizing that at the start of the pandemic was extremely important. And then taking steps to try and mitigate and try to help solve and help people manage the situations. Agency life is stressful in the best of days, pre-pandemic, and maybe hopefully post-pandemic as well. But at least you had a bit of a break where you physically went to an office and then you physically came back, and that was sort of the boundary that you would set yourself, like Emma was saying earlier. So removing that actual movement boundary and going to a situation where you literally wake up, you can open up your laptop and essentially start working, and then at some level, people feel like because your office is your home and your home is your office, you almost feel compelled to do that. That's not good, and that's not a good mentality to let steep in. And I think the other thing was that people just didn't take leave, because at the start of the pandemic, everyone was just like, well, it's going to last for a few months. I'll probably be able to travel, see my family or see my friends, or go to the UK or wherever, by October. And as things became worse, it's like, yeah, by November, then things became worse. Okay, by 2022 maybe. So I think one of the things that no one really started taking leave, and that's again just not sustainable. So one of the things that we did is I actually asked people to take mandatory leave. I said, look, in the month of May, you have to take at least 1 day of leave. Otherwise, it's just not sustainable. It's not good for your own mental health. And I think, we slowly started having more public conversations about this. And I think, like Emma said, it has to come from the top. You have to be able to create an environment where people are willing to share what's challenging them. People are willing to share openly what they're facing and what they're feeling. And you have to create that level of environment, that environment. And then you have to create policies that can help solve those issues and cater to those things. So one of the things that, you know, we've already had in some ways before, but we've actually, you know, seen can be done on a larger scale is actually having, you know, more people work remotely as a permanent option and have them come to the office as an option, you know, once a week or twice a week. Having a mandatory minimum number of days that they have to take leave, and then above that, unlimited leave that they can take. That's something else that we've implemented as well. And I think these are things that people will start evaluating and looking at and implementing as we go forward. Because at the end of the day, you are driven by people. The success of the organization is driven by people. If your people are not well, if people are not at 100%, if your people are not being treated in the right way and being nurtured and being put on the best platform to be able to succeed, then, you know, you're going to lose the essence of what your business is, and you're going to lose, and you're not going to be able to operate at the level that you know, you think you can. So people have to be the forefront of our industry, and we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to take best care of them.
Okay, thanks. Now we'll just go to the Q&A. We have about 10 minutes and we have questions around a few areas. I'll try to pick one from each of the topics that we talked about. So the first question is, what's your take on the 2021 Admiral Trust Barometer, which indicates that communications from an employer are the most trusted form or sources of information, beating out even the government and traditional media? Emma, do you want to take that question on first?
Yeah, I saw that stat when I was reading through the Trust Barometer. It's really interesting. You know, I do wonder what kind of comes behind that. Has our trust in other organizations declined to such a point where actually the person who pays us is now the only person that we will trust in that way? That's a really interesting proposition. So yeah, I think, you know, that obviously comes with big responsibilities for employers. And I know later on there is a session on internal communications as well. So it'll be interesting to see if that point, you know, is raised. And I'd encourage, if you're going to listen into that session, to, you know, to raise that as a question as well. But it just means that we have got to be so focused, and that goes back to PR working at the highest levels, to understand that what we are doing and what we are putting out internally, you know, from an employer perspective, has a huge impact onto its employees. Employee internal communications is not something we should be taking lightly. And also the setting of that culture as well is then key to how we communicate and what we're communicating. So I'd say it's absolutely, you know, it means it's just more important than ever before for employers to be hyper aware of how they're communicating, what they are communicating.
Thanks for that. Yep.
I just want to add one more thing. I think, yeah, I alluded to this title earlier, an epidemic of misinformation, right? It's to be in a situation where governments are not trusted is a very bad situation to be in. And it's very unfortunate that, you know, a lot of things that have happened that's led to that situation. I think that probably the topic for an hour-long discussion separately, the role of social media in breaking down these level of trust, this level of trust that people traditionally have in governments. And I think the other point is that it's interesting because the countries that were affected the most, I think when you look at the US, you look at the UK, you look at China, I think it specifically alluded to some, you know, some of the allegations of cover-ups and censorship, especially at the start of the pandemic. And you look at Brazil and you know, places like that. I think it's really important to try and understand the context of those countries, the political context. And I think that will give a lot of information about why trust in those particular countries has decreased and has really gone down in the last year.
Another question that I think I'm also I've been challenged to sort of, you know, address and change the way I work in terms of reaching out to, say, a younger audience, is that they don't really go to news portals anymore, or they don't even read the news, you know, like, you know, the other generations used to do when they were still physically flipping papers. So how do we then, you know, sort of flip the earned media to owned and even further shared channels? So how do you think we are, you know, what we can do to try to reach the younger generation, which, you know, we talked about maybe even more distrusting of the traditional media that, you know, that we come to sort of, or we used to rely on to give out accurate and factually checked news. Emma, do you want to take on this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things, and previous to Cognito, a lot of my work was with influencers as well. The rise of the influencer and the level of trust that people place in the influencer is extremely interesting. And it's something, when I started out in communications, that was absolutely unfathomable that we would be asking people who are sort of doing their own thing to actually, put forward those key messages about our brand, which is so carefully crafted. I think influencers are a really, are so key for a lot of brands now, because we naturally trust other people. If trust in media, trust in governments is declining, we trust the people who we think are similar to us and have similar belief systems and values as well. I think that comes back then to the point I discussed earlier. It's about advising your clients and educating them that high engagement, high reach, particularly in an influencer perspective, doesn't always equal high engagement or the right person for the brand. Just because that influencer has 300,000 followers doesn't mean they are right for your specific brand. So it's really, as we would do with the media, tailoring our lists, the targets for those influencers to make sure that they are they live those brand values as well. They're aligned completely with our brand, and they're not just the people who will kind of jump on any bandwagon and promote anything. So it's really got to be very tailored and constantly keeping an eye on, maintaining a media profile, but also then really knowing our audience for our clients. Who are they following? Who do they look up to? And getting our messages, our products into those, with those key audiences and key targets.
Yes, Emma, I'm old school. I was surprised when, my agency furnished me with a media list that had a longer influencer list than a traditional media list. That was something I had to change my mind, my mindset, and it took me a while, but yes, there you go. Change is key. Yeah.
On the corporate side now, our clients are also asking us to look at influencers. Who are the big influencers in the fintech domain? How do we get our brand recognized or talked about by those people? So, it's coming all the way now from that more consumer product-led, trend-led element fully into the LinkedIn and more kind of corporate influencer domain in that sense.
Pranav, do you want to add to that question?
Yeah, I just answered in a slightly different way. I think I'll focus a little bit more on how can we ensure that we have trusted information going to the younger generation, and maybe not just the younger generation, maybe to sort of everyone. I think, and this is kind of something that I've been discussing, and I've been sort of mentioning this for a few months. I think we'll start seeing social media platforms get regulated. We'll probably start seeing the seeds of this get sowed this year, and we'll start seeing proper regulation of social media channels to avoid disinformation and to avoid a situation where millions of people can get sort of can just access what's clearly false, and avoid situations where people can run campaigns that end up in thousands of people dying, and like what we saw in Myanmar and in other places. I think we'll start seeing social media being regulated. Who it's regulated by, how it's regulated, who becomes the arbiter of truth, that's going to be a big question. But I definitely think it's a very interesting topic to keep an eye on going forward.
Okay, and now we have a question that again, sort of opens up a debate for using AVE as sort of a performance matrix that bosses love, or in-house bosses love anyway, because they see it's a very tangible indication of how much a company would have saved if they had advertised, right? So PR value is still something that 20 years into my career is still used predominantly. So because PR is moving beyond media, so we talked about, it's moving beyond traditional media, it's now crossing over to the social media space using influencers. So how do we reconcile measurements, or what measurements do you think we need to start using now to really show the client that what we're doing or the work that we do is really driving business recovery or contributing to the business in a very tangible way? Emma, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I knew when we mentioned AV that there was
it would open up, yes, many questions.
Yeah, so absolutely, there's many different ways of reporting. Ultimately, it's got to be what's best for your client. But I'd say, if this year we move, and the industry starts to move more down towards how is it driving engagement with our brand, with our product, rather than just people passively viewing something. Are they engaging? Are we creating kind of interest? Are people asking questions? Are they debating with us about certain issues? That's really important. Relationship building as well, going back to the point I made earlier, if we are looking particularly, and I'm talking about more traditional media channels, how are we moving things with those journalists? Are we more recognized? Are we more trusted as a brand right now? And asking clients as well. I think, when we talk about, it's very easy to see engagement on an Instagram post because you can see the comments, you can see how many people have taken the time to view or to engage or to do something in that way.
Save the post, or
Exactly. And but we don't know that with with our traditional media outlets. So we need to go and we need to talk to the people that matter. And I'd encourage, our clients to talk to their target audiences. And to really get those insights from the ground up, rather than just relying on numbers or what the PR agency is being kind of forced to give you in terms of measurement in that sense as well.
Pranav, this is our last question, so we're going to go to you to sort of wrap up this session that we have.
Sure. Again, I think I'll just sort of reiterate what I said earlier about metrics and how we report back have to tie into what was the initial problem that you're trying to solve for the client. So if you have a business objective and you have a specific challenge, and the AVE metric does not fit into saying that you've been able to solve that challenge, it does not add any value to saying that you've solved that challenge, then there's no point using it. So find something that adds value to what the work that you've done to showcase that what you've done has been effective, and use that and discuss that with your stakeholders or the clients, and discuss that with the team regularly, discuss it up front, and come to a conclusion about what is the most effective way of measuring the campaign. And I think that's always the best way to do it. Work together with the teams. Don't just report something because they say you have to report it because 10 years ago that's how we used to report it, 5 years ago that's how we used to report it. So have a proactive conversation to suggest better ways of doing things.
Yeah, it's education on all sides.
Yes. Thank you, Emma and Pranav, for this very, very, insightful session. I'm sure everyone, will walk away with very useful learnings that they can apply moving forward. We actually have a few more questions that we didn't get to answer. So just to let the audience know that PRCA will respond to you via email on those questions that we didn't get to. Thank you so much again, Emma and Pranav.
Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Tara, for organizing it, and thanks, Emma, for jumping on this panel and adding all your value to this. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Big thank you to Pranav, Emma, and Tracy Louis, Senior Assistant Director of Marketing and Comms at One Faber Group. And earlier on, we were talking about the company, which is the holding company for attractions, including Singapore Cable Car and restaurants at Mount Faber. And I'm looking forward to visiting Dusk. So thank you all. I'd like to welcome our next speaker, who is known in this scene. Hi, Lars Voedisch. He is the head of Precious Comms, which is a 50-staff-strong regional award-winning integrated comms consultancy. And they've worked with some big names and exciting names in our industry, from Citi to DBS, DHL, and Foodpanda. And Lars is going to talk about the start of the Southeast Asian rise and how it matters to communicators. Over to you, Lars.
Hi, Lena. How are you doing today? All good?
Yeah, the human connection, right?
Excellent, excellent. Let me just, yeah. So first of all, I actually want to play a song, but I'm not good at the piano. And I was listening to it this morning while running. And it's Elton John, I'm Still Standing. And I think it's a big shout out to everybody on the agency and in-house side who made it through last year and is indeed still standing.
You can sing it, Lars.
So, yeah. Good. Let me just quickly make the presentation there. So I want to talk about the start of Southeast Asia's rise, right? For me, that's really important because it's about, well, the region that we are, but it's especially also about the opportunities that we have here at Abundance. So let me just put the slides up 1 second. Make sure I have the right one. I wanted to use this new fancy tool, but it seems it didn't want to allow me to use this tool. So don't worry. Oh, here. I hope you can see that now. Yeah, cool. Okay, so Southeast Asia, we are all still standing. And you know what I learned through the last economic crisis, GFC, SARS, every time there was a massive economic disruption, actually PR came out stronger. And I expect this to happen again this year. And why? If you look at all the different marketing disciplines, there's always a good look into what gives you the best bang for the buck. And I think every crisis is an opportunity for public relations to shine and actually get an uplift. And I believe that's what we'll see again. Just one word about us. We are precious 9 years this year with 50 people across greater Southeast Asia. So why Southeast Asia? And you know, for some of you, it's like, yeah, why is he talking? What is he talking about? It's so obvious, but for me, it's always a good and important reminder. It's 11 countries, 650 million people, and a massive general GDP growth, right? That's all with the caveat of pre-COVID and expected recovery. Of course, we'll see some abnormal spikes this year, but we also have fantastic countries like Vietnam who seem to be unscattered and have a consistent GDP growth here. We have especially the ASEAN 6 that traditionally see a 4 to 6% GDP growth. Why is that important? And I'm talking less as a PR person, more like an economist, because I believe as PR people, we have to be tuned in and look at the opportunities that we are out there, right? 4 of the top 10 global economies of the G10 are actually in Asia. We have China, we have India, we have Japan, we have Korea just made it top 10, and that's fantastic. And that's important because that reshuffles global kind of powers, and Southeast Asia or ASEAN is in between those global trade powers. And it becomes more powerful because if you look at some of the global massive trends, right? We see the US-China trade war, and I don't believe that will soften down much under the new administration. So that means where do I place my bets? We had COVID as a massive disruptor for supply and value chains, right? We had Korean car manufacturers that had to stop production because their downstream supply from China was frozen. So we have a lot of macroeconomic pressures that will put more emphasis on Southeast Asia. Reshuffling of supply chains, because COVID showed if you put all your eggs in one basket, you might just have an empty basket. Second, with the global trade tensions, you have to look at alternatives if you want to avoid sanctions and want to have multiple options. And one of on top of that, COVID forced digital transformation upon all of us, right? And that means it's also encouraging, enforcing, and enabling decentralization more than ever before. How often in the last year have you heard pre-COVID, oh, that's not possible, we can't do it? And what parts of the panel were talking about is, yes, with COVID as the enabler for digital adoption, suddenly it doesn't matter if you're sitting in the US or you're sitting in Singapore or you're sitting in Bangalore anymore, because it's the value that you can provide. What we also should look at is the Southeast Asian economic fundamentals. And that's normally in every kind of upswing, it's the middle class that's happening, that's enabling that. And for a couple of years, we've seen a strong sustainable growth of middle class, especially in the ASEAN 6, because that spurs domestic consumption and other things, right? So there are a lot of global economic indicators, in my opinion, that will spur an economic rise of Southeast Asia. So why is then this the place to be? Why should we be here? It's that location that offers connectivity in between China, in between India, in between the US, in between Europe and Japan and Australia, right? So it's that natural trading kind of location that we're in that helps us to accelerate growth. Digital adoption in Southeast Asia is one of the fastest globally, and I'll throw some stats at you in a moment. And actually, overall, there's a relatively highly skilled talent force at play that other countries or regions would die for. There are a few levers, and ASEAN is not as united as, for example, the European Union, but there are key initiatives that are actually driving connectivity. There are initiatives about customs clearance, especially if you talk about trade, supply chains, that's absolutely important. There was just a trade pact with the EU and ASEAN enabled, and now it goes one country by the other, free trade agreement. Singapore, EU already working. Vietnam, I think, was signed just end of last year, and so on. So trade becomes much easier with Southeast Asia. Here are a few of the new ASEAN key industry levers beyond what we already have. Manufacturing hubs, and most likely it's Vietnam, traditionally Thailand, that will benefit from that. Green infrastructure is a big global initiative, and especially with the Biden administration it will become more dominant also on the global agenda again. We have, interestingly, we have a lot of green power supply in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, but because the infrastructure is not there, we're not sharing those resources yet, right? Talent reskilling, of course, is happening. High value food industry. So the opportunity is that generally in our supply chains, we move also up the value chain. That's happening, and that's all on the back of the digital transformation. And that's the number that I was alluring to earlier. Southeast Asia has some of the most engaged users in the world. That doesn't mean just consumption, that also means habits. That means natural affinity to a medium like, I'm originally from Germany, and my mom is still afraid of online shopping. Well, here, it's going fast. And interestingly, though, that countries like Indonesia have a low credit card penetration, there's still a solution with cash on delivery, right? So with all the wallets happening, Southeast Asia is looking for solutions that work for the population. They don't force solutions on people that don't make sense and maybe have worked somewhere else in the world. And the opportunity in Southeast Asia on just internet economy, and I'm sure most of you heard about the internet economy report by Google and Temasek that's updated, right? Regularly. It's insane how fast this is growing in this part of the world. Diversity, and that's just a small example on the diversity, the flip side, right? The flip side of it. E-commerce in Southeast Asia is, first of all, it's mobile, very different from many other countries or regions or geographies. Second, it's not as unified as it might seem. There are a lot of players in play. I think I just read yesterday, one of the large Taiwanese e-commerce players, Momo, wants to enter Southeast Asia as well. So it's that just this small snapshot shows us it's not a unified market. It's a big market. It has a lot of people, but it's not unified. And why do I lay that out? It's because what do global firms see and seek? They see that giant market opportunity, 650 million people, relatively untapped still. And that's what they want to do, right? Because if you look at economic trends, again, COVID effects outside, then where do you want to see the next growth for your global business? Saturated markets in the US, in Europe, that's reshuffling with the Brexit. Africa, possibly not ready yet. China, expensive to enter. And if you are not playing there yet, it might be too late. So a lot of global firms look into doubling down on Southeast Asia, because where else do you expect sustainable growth for the next decade? And COVID has been that accelerator for so many things. And one of them is putting Southeast Asia on the map. Geopolitical, we know that the US administration will have a special envoy for Indo-Pacific. We know that the European Union, Germany puts a lot of emphasis on this part of the world to build relations and also to counter what other global players are doing. So there's the opportunity. Players want to double down here. New market entries will come. At the same time, we'll also have the companies that are already here. They want to grow faster. What do they need? And that's the interesting part. And I'm sure especially my colleagues from the agency side know that. Oh, I want to do Southeast Asia. First of all, there's no Southeast Asia approach. It's still 11 countries, at least 11 different approaches. And because Southeast Asia is part of Asia, Asia is only 15% of my global market. So the budget is tiny like that, right? So they want to grab everything for a tiny budget. And that's where normally miscommunication comes along. Because it's not 650 million people, it's different cultures, languages, regulations, currencies, geographies, right? It's faster and cheaper to do a shipment from Manila to Bangkok than from Manila to one of the further away islands in the Philippines, because their transport infrastructure doesn't allow for that yet. So what we should offer, and that's the opportunity that I want to just put on everybody's mind, is real insights. And that puts us away from, hey, we're discussing media lists or influencer lists or that. It's about real guidance and advisory that goes beyond just being a media relations person. We always scream and beg that we want this table at the board, we want that chair at the board table, right? Why is PR super strategic, but not taken seriously? And I think this is the golden opportunity because of the business needs and what we can help our global clients with. I don't say we should be, become lawyers and advise on customs regulations, but it's really helping our global marketing and PR friends to place their bets right. It's still their bets, it's still their money, but we know the game better than anybody else. And what do they need for that? It's the real advice on, hey, you want to do Southeast Asia? Pick at max two countries to start with. Yes, it's nice to have more flags planted, but it might be wise to actually go deep before you go wide. Different countries, different approach, right? And a lot of our startups, same category. One goes very quickly wide, the other one just goes deep, one market at a time. And for me, that's the golden opportunity, the nugget that we have. It's huge challenges, but it's also huge opportunities. It's a fragmented market with regional plays. But if we help our clients to play that well, we help them also not just to grow, but also to bring up their defensibility. Because in the next decade, we'll see more and more global brands that have not been here or haven't really focused on this region to invest massively and grow here. So for our current clients is to help them differentiate them and up their defensibility, for new market entries to help them to place their bets, right? So many clients that we speak to is, hey, we want to go Indonesia because it's the biggest country. So, okay, what's your approach? Oh yeah, we have those global press releases in English that we just want to distribute. Okay, who's your Bahasa spokesperson? What do you mean, right? Or then, okay, we have that spokesperson. Can we do the same in the Philippines and Thailand and Vietnam? Maybe, maybe not, right? Interestingly, and I'm sure all of you have that same experience, it's about how many times I've heard it doesn't work, it won't work, it has never worked, right? Through COVID, we suddenly have the insights, we had to do it. Virtual press briefings in Indonesia, where everybody say, yeah, can't work in English, can't work because of internet connectivity. And tata, in the last 3 weeks, we ran 2 very successful virtual media briefings in Indonesia. It works, it changes. And what the panelists said earlier, so many changes brought upon us. What do we want to do with that, right? What do we want to do with those challenges? Because they're all opportunities for us, but especially for our clients. This is the golden opportunity because this is the start of the rise of Southeast Asia. Advise them what they need. How can we help them? You know, a lot of times Singapore has a play in it, but how important does it really have to be? So we always wanted to be called consultants and not just agency people. It's up to us if we take up this responsibility and deserve this title. It's time for Asia, it's time for Southeast Asia, and it's our time to shine. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lars. Very useful information and insights into Southeast Asia. Thank you. We'll take a break until 11:25, and then let me introduce the next speaker right after that. So a quick bio break. I believe we have a couple of questions for Lars, and I would let you know that these questions will be forwarded to him for him to answer. Once again, thank you, Lars. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Shonali Chakravarty, who will talk about the growing role of internal comms. Shonali is the head of comms in APAC for the Lenovo Data Center Group, and she is responsible for driving internal and external comms and analyst relations across 13 countries. So over to you, Shonali.
Thank you, Lena. And this has been a very interesting conversation since morning. I'm glad to be a part of this. Let me quickly share my screen. Don't mind the quick test. All right, I guess increasingly we've thought about internal communications as being something that's good to have, more of a check in the box really, in one's larger communications arsenal. But 2020 taught us some very interesting things about internal communications, actually made us question our own assumptions about this field. And 2021 therefore brings with it some new learnings and perhaps a different understanding of this entire medium. So let's start from the very beginning, right? Our basic understanding of internal communications has been around how we try and reduce uncertainty through providing timely information, and how internal communications is a method of also boosting employee motivation through contests, rewards and recognition programs, organizing face-to-face meetups, events, gatherings, etc. Right? Now, this traditional understanding of internal communications really was turned over on its head these past couple of months, where we had to think of internal comms as something that had to communicate uncertainty. No one really knew what the end date to this pandemic was going to be, and what changes is the new normal going to continue to bring. And when you think about boosting motivation through R&R programs or through fun content, campaign contests, one had to completely overlook the physical world and rethink of all of this being conducted virtually, where people who are sitting perhaps miles away from each other still need to feel a special connection with one another. So I think there are two key trends, or two key causal factors, if I may, that have impacted internal communications in 2021. I do attribute one important internal communications trend to the effect of technological change, and perhaps four key trends to the move towards a dispersed workforce. Let's just dive into what all of this really entails for this part of our world. Today, when we think about the impact that technology is making, between March of 2020 to March of 2021, change is continuous. The way that HR pundits are thinking about hiring or thinking about employees transitioning out of the workspace, calculations are increasingly skewed towards turning a number of designations, a number of roles redundant. I don't think people really are going to think about large teams that are managing office facilities or front desk persons, or people who are part of support systems as being as important as they were before the pandemic. So according to the World Economic Fund's Future of Jobs report, for instance, 85% of organizations today are expanding into new technologies. So when you think about 5G, AI, edge computing, IoT. All of these are buzzwords, not just for enterprise tech firms, but also for organizations that are any organization. Today, whether you're a restaurant or whether it's a company that's primarily a services-based consultancy, every organization has effectively become a tech company in some way or the other. 2020 did that to all of us. Our digital transformation definitely accelerated. So while there are good things to expect from this change, one thing that also happens is that for the 133 million new jobs that may be generated by 2022 from the adoption of AI, robotics, algorithms, 75 million jobs will be replaced. And that means that you can't really control the future of jobs or the future of how your organization will think about its roles, the number of people that it requires. Employee experience, therefore, becomes extremely important because we can't guarantee tenure. And if most employees feel disconnected and don't understand that decisions are being taken are fair, or that there is a certain process or a method to the madness, if you may, chances are that an organization's program is very likely to fail. That brings us to 2021's first, internal communication trend. Jobs are not permanent, ladies and gentlemen, but satisfaction should be. There has been a lot of research recently, especially by economists in England and Australia, that suggests that it takes longer to adapt to the pain of unemployment than to losing a loved one. When I read that for the first time, and I went through that entire body of work, I was startled on, and the first thought that came to my mind was that the effect of losing a job doesn't just impact a single individual, it impacts everyone who's connected to that individual. So the way that transition, or the way that we communicate something as sensitive to an employee as telling them that their services may no longer be required for reasons perhaps beyond the control of the organization or beyond the control of the larger environment, it's important to bring in a certain amount of sensitivity in the way organizations go about this. A couple of examples that you're seeing on your screen are from the way reporting around some insensitively communicated layoffs has been. Just a couple of lines here that I want you to pay attention to. And all of this has again been written by some of the best publications across Southeast Asia, across Asia Pacific. Notice the usage of language here, for instance. There is a company that laid off employees in an arpeggio of simultaneous Zoom calls lasting just 3 minutes each. Axed workers were upset how layoffs were handled. That was the headline. There is an employee who's been quoted as referring to that entire episode as feeling like something straight out of Black Mirror. Several other agencies also have been reporting about how internal communications didn't play the role that it was expected to when communicating this major change to employees. And what this does to corporate reputation is right in front of you on your screens. Some employees seem to have found out about the news from other sources. There are people who mentioned to reporters that the process felt cold, unprofessional, and very rushed. Some individuals mentioned that the issues are not likely going around the compensation package, but the delivery of the message and whether it was compassionately done. There were headlines and stories on news pegs really that were being developed on survivors' guilt. As it turns out, in a situation where job losses as well as creation of new roles with the impact of technology is going to be continuous, the way that organizations handle this transition the way that they internally communicate this change is going to determine not just corporate reputation, but how external media are going to report about the organization and form a certain view about the organization. So internal becomes the new external in this case. So whether you have employees who are being furloughed or folks who are staying, internal comms has a responsibility to get it right. There are, of course, some organizations that did show the necessary sensitivity and maturity in handling these conversations. My feeling is that perhaps they focused on three key elements. Part one was communicating with a sense of transparency. Nothing feels better than the truth in these situations. And if we don't try and sugarcoat things too much, but lay out the facts as transparently as we can in front of employees, and then, of course, also externally communicated through various means, that makes a world of a difference. Ensuring that there is a follow-up action, that our words are also supplemented with ways in which the organization is going to, for instance, and take care of its employees, the way the organization has thought about the compensation package, the rehabilitation package. Is the organization concerned about the mental health of its employees, and if there are some steps that it is planning to take? All of that, those actions need to come through in an internal comms message. And last but not the least, empathy is extremely important, right? I don't know if everyone has seen Arne Sorensen, the CEO of Marriott's message early on in the year, where he spoke to employees across Marriott worldwide, as well as to investors, customers, and all other stakeholders in a very emotional video, which where he exposed his own vulnerabilities and demonstrated authentic leadership by bringing that feeling of empathy in that conversation, that there are factors that are beyond our control. We will do the best we can. And that's why that entire episode was heartwarming, and Marriott did receive praise for the way it handled this terrible transition. Airbnb's message to employees, or even a small lodging firm called Meredith Lodging, received a lot of love on LinkedIn, in internal channels, as well as external channels, for the way that they were able to bring transparency, action, and empathy together. Moving on to, I think, the next key development that's making an impact on internal communication trends, the move towards a more dispersed workforce. For internal communicators, I believe it's critical to understand how to reach this growing dispersed workforce. The reality of today's world is that frontline employees or deskless employees will make up 80% of the global workforce. So that means that there will be people who may continue to work remotely from home through the entire duration of 2021, 2022, and so on. And the percentage of independent contractors or last mile workers really is going to increase substantially. There was a survey that was recently conducted by KPMG, and the results are in front of you. 23% HR leaders believe increased use of gig workers and agile teams is going to be a lasting takeaway from COVID-19. 17% feel that there is going to be increased use of outsourcing to provide more flexibility and access to talent. What does this mean for internal communications? Again, challenges and opportunities. So the next key trend really is that purpose is extremely important. When an employee reads communication materials about the organization, the employee should feel that they're getting enough information to make up their minds on what the organization stands for. Is my company doing enough for the environment or communities in which it operates? And is the organization interacting with stakeholders in a manner that makes me proud. Why is that increasingly relevant? 98% of employees currently use at least one social media site for personal use, of which 50% are already posting about their company. And 71% of employees spend over 2 hours a week accessing company information on mobile devices. So the more that employees from different organizations begin to post content on social media platforms about what's happening in their company, the more employees feel that it's important for their organization to be doing the right things, for them to be seen as being a part of an organization that they can believe in. That sense of purpose has to be able to motivate employees more than a run-of-the-mill contest or a rewards and recognition program. Two examples in front of you are from Uber and from Amazon, where one talked about how the company is partnering in the rollout of vaccines, providing pro bono rides and assisting in that entire logistics last mile. And another instance is of where Amazon really wanted to bring out how its last mile agents are delivering smiles come rain or shine, really going to the farthest corners of India, walking through knee-deep snow just to ensure that packages are delivered and there is customer delight. And both of these posts actually got phenomenal likes on LinkedIn. And again, nothing to do with how the organization has won an award, nothing to do with how it's celebrating the rise of a certain employee or a CEO, but more to do with how employees feel that the organization is doing the right thing at the right time. There has been an interesting study of CEOs across both the Americas and AP, again by KPMG, where the results indicated that CEOs themselves believe that purpose is more powerful and relevant than ever. 79% CEOs said that they feel a stronger emotional connection to their organization's purpose since the crisis began. They also believe that they have to reevaluate their purpose as a result of COVID-19 to better address the needs of their stakeholders. 77% felt that purpose had helped them understand what they need to do to meet the needs of stakeholders, employees, communities, partners, and that it provides a clear framework for making quick and effective COVID-19 related decisions. So clearly purpose is a top of mind for decision makers, and it's also a top of mind for employees in this day and time. Internal comms therefore has to get it right. The third trend, ladies and gentlemen, is around how the ambit therefore of internal comms is much bigger than one's employees. Today, the employee's journey at the beginning and end of tenure is equally important. The way that they experience the organization will determine what prospects or applicants think about the company. An example before you indicates how an employee who was leaving the organization wrote this beautiful appreciation post, and there are many like him, where he mentioned how he was gifted a guitar and received these wonderful remembrance videos and handwritten adieu notes that definitely raised the emotional quotient as well as separation anxiety in his words. Beautiful, small, little things that make a big difference to the way an employee feels about the organization, especially in a day and age of where everyone's working remotely, determine how not just your current employees, but how everyone else feels about whether the organization is a great place to work or not. Family members, peer groups, friends of employees matter to the IC world now more than ever. There have been a couple of instances on LinkedIn, for instance, where a lot of people have shared the letters that they have received from the head of HR or from their CEO, whether they're promotion letters or whether they are letters of inviting them to join an organization, where the family members, the loved ones of an employee have been thanked for the way that they have help that particular employee in their journey. And that feeling that, those words were able to communicate that, the organization values not just the employee, but his family members, his loved ones, his friends, does leave a lasting impression. Again, shareable content on social media platforms is growing. And so that's also helping advocacy groups or the industry, for instance, determine and actually rate every day the organization's reputation online. There are a couple of companies that have started Instagram accounts, for instance, that are dedicated to celebrating employees. You have an example in front of you. There's this company called Oyo, which has created an Instagram account called Oyopreneurs. It refers to its employees as intrapreneurs and therefore Oyopreneurs. And that account simply tracks employees and mentions what have they been up to, who have been, how have employees been keeping during this time. The fourth trend is around timing, and timing really today is everything. Work has never been more invasive in our homes, and internal communications therefore needs to keep things simple. What does that really mean? One is that we should deconflict activities and events involving multiple time zones. If there is an all hands call that is happening in a North America time zone, it doesn't make sense to ask employees in Asia Pacific to wake up at odd hours just so that everyone's tuned in to the same all hands. Simple fixes like ensuring that the same all hands is available, say 7 hours later, or maybe there are two people. Maybe the AP leader is conducting the all hands at the same time in his geography or her geography makes a big difference. Less is more. Engage in quality activities and conversations. Everything can't necessarily be about celebrating work accomplishments or simply talking up organizational strategy. Important also for internal communications to bring in collaterals that advocate and encourage respect for personal time. Couple of examples before you are of, for instance, a 5x5x5 challenge that an enterprise tech company MD started in AP, where he was keen on ensuring that his employees think about their personal health and their mental health, and take a nice 5-kilometer run, donate perhaps $5 or more to a charity of their choice, and nominate 5 others in their teams. Again, heartwarming messages which humanize the leaders are a better form of executive communications during this time than a cold, calculated thank you note. The last trend, ladies and gentlemen, is around measurement. And again, the way that the traditional definition of internal communications is being turned on its head in 2020 and now 2021. Measurement too needs to move away from the open rate, engagement rate conundrum. Questions that measurement should solve for and ask include, is it leading to changed behaviors? What's the channel mix like pre and post COVID? Are we using a lot of things at the same time? Is that confusing employees? How many of these channels are actually mobile friendly? Moving on to more qualitative questions, can we, for instance, make LinkedIn a thing? Since in any case, employees are spending a lot of time on social media, maybe we integrate that and make sure that we talk more on LinkedIn. Can we conduct short surveys, snap polls to confirm or contradict decisions or insights that we are taking? Can all hands, for instance, become the new battleground for testing ideas and resolve? There are applications like Slido, for instance, that allow employees to submit their questions and either anonymously or directly ask those questions, and majority of those questions are upvoted or downvoted. So leaders know which are the questions that the audience or employees really want answered first, or what's really their most pressing need. So the way we think about measurement also therefore has to evolve. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Shonali. Very interesting insights. I mean, certainly purpose comes in many ways, not just in external comms, but also in internal comms. And thank you for exploring the different aspects, especially when it comes to attracting future employees. I'd like to introduce our next panel of speakers. Oh yes, before I forget, if you have any questions, please do direct them to Tara and she will send them to Shonali to answer. Okay, moving on to the next panel, which is on Southeast Asia's post-COVID future and the implications for communicators. Hosting the panel is Amanda Lee, who is Director Asia for Prospect Resourcing, an award-winning recruitment business for PR and the comms industry with offices in London, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And her panelists come from Sinclair Comms, H&K, and SOJERN. So some takeaways would be that teams still need top-down encouragement to help create a positive outlook. They need to be empowered, and we need to be more human in our approach. It's come through quite a lot in today's different discussions. So over to you, Amanda.
Thanks, Lena. Good morning. I'm so pleased to be representing Prospect and to be here today. So for our panel session, we explore Southeast Asia's future for communicators. What does recovery and rebound look like? So McKinsey has called 2021 the year of transition. While we are not all out of the woods with COVID, but the vaccine is light at the end of the tunnel, which means organizations can shape the future rather than simply wait it out or grind through the present. So my panelists today will touch on the key trends they see and offer some tips for fellow communicators. So first up, I would like to introduce Sai. There you are. Hi. So I have Sai Roshini Daswani, the Director and Head of BD Singapore for Sinclair Communications, an independent PR, digital and experiential communications agency with offices in Hong Kong, Shanghai and Beijing. Sai heads up the Singapore hub and works across key corporate consumer luxury lifestyle accounts. Sai is Taiwan-born, Hong Kong raised and speaks English, Hindi, French and Cantonese. Very impressive. Next, I have Marianne Admartadine, the CEO for Hill & Knowlton Strategies Indonesia. Marianne is a veteran in the Indonesian communications and marketing industry. She has deep expertise advising senior clients on comms, crisis, branding, marketing, and PR. Marianne was voted one of the top 100 powerful women in Indonesia by SWA, Indonesia's first-tier business media. Last but not least, I'm pleased to introduce Teesta Raha. Teesta leads PR for EMEA and APAC at SOJERN, which offers digital marketing solutions for the travel industry. SOJERN is headquartered in San Francisco with teams based all around the world. Teesta has 10 years of multicultural experience and has worked mainly in agencies across the UK, UAE, Oman, and Singapore. Her main sector focus has been technology, both B2B and B2C. I know it's been a busy week for you all, so really pleased to have you three on the panel today.
Thanks, Amanda.
So as we've all heard from Lars earlier, Southeast Asia is the place to be. We are seeing the rise of the middle class, digital investments, adoption, highly skilled talent force, all great things going for us. Let me start off the discussion by putting this question to all three of you. So tell us, how has your business or clients' business objectives changed? What are you doing differently in 2021? Perhaps Marianne, would you like to start? And this is a question for all three of you.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Hope my voice is clear.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for having me today. To just go straight to answer the question. when we talk about clients business change, probably it's not exactly change, but it's modified because of what's happening, globally. And what we see from our client is they've modified the approach and they've invested heavily in purpose and sustainable better impact work. So they're more humane. So they look at personal connection more rather than just a business objective. I have this target, I need to get there. But they are more now looking at, how can I have a better connection and how can I contribute better? I mean, beyond, sales and profit, which is, it's a nice position to be. And in terms of, what we are doing differently, again, adapting to all of this and adapting to the client's need, we are obviously looking at all kinds of avenues and all kinds of platforms available to be used, right? And we are definitely more concentrated on content production rather than event management, which is, it is a large part of the PR business. And we come up with a lot more interactive online activities. And when I said interactive, it's not so much the company is giving a message and then trying to get some answers and feedback, but more creating real online activities to get the consumer talk to them rather than them just listening and then reacting, which is, again, it is nice and it's quite a new experience. The team are adjusting, but because we are here in a way forced to be here, we are also coming up with, the team is coming up with a lot of creativity that we have not thought before. And so the synergy with the client, the relationship between the agency and the client, I see it also a lot more closer and see each other as partners rather than client and agency relationship. Again, I feel this is an elevation, despite with everything is what's been happening so far. But Sai and Teesta, you probably had either a different take or you want to add to that, please.
Maybe I can jump in to add to that. So good morning, everybody, as well. Well, it's almost afternoon. So actually, for just jumping back a little bit, so I think all of us know that in 2020, we were all in like crisis mode, trying to talk about what's going to come up, what's happening, what the new normal would look like. I would say for 2021, a lot more people are taking their time to really come up with a more considered response to what we need to be doing. So one thing that we've definitely learned a lot about is reputation, what leadership should look like, so many conversations about purpose, but more importantly, at the base of all of this is creativity. And we're seeing a lot more of that come out for 2021. So I think one thing that we'll be looking at with a lot of our clients and their objectives and what they're looking to do forward would be really helping them build their reputation, but in a creative way, help them tell their story, build their credibility, and as everybody's been talking about, really share their purpose as well, internally and externally. So I think it's not just about the external comms and all of that, it's also about looking at how you're communicating to your teams in-house, and making sure everything is aligned and there's some consistency across all channels of communication. Another thing is, I think people are being more picky about what channels they use, and being more selective, but also like choosing a channel and then owning it. So I think we're definitely going to be seeing a lot more of that coming up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amanda, and good afternoon. Yeah, I can also touch upon this. I think, our business objectives have changed quite drastically, I would say, and things that we're doing quite differently would be, 3 or 4 key things. I think one is having very agile plans. I think, in the past we had long drawn plans or plans that covered, the entire year, whereas now they're much shorter time frame. They look at quarter, if not even less than that. So very dynamic in nature. I think the second point is really relying on data. I mean, at SOJERN, we are a data-driven company, so we have had that advantage. But I think to Sai's point of trying to be more creative with it, what can we do it differently? How do we use it differently? I would say has been something we've really spent time investing in and will continue to do so in 2021. And then the third thing I would say is really working with a partnership model, whether it's, especially for us in travel, recovery for the travel industry will happen together. It's not going to be, one airline that does better than the other airline. It's all kind of on the same, we're all on the same page at this at this point of time. So whether it's investing in those partnerships and relationships is very vital, something perhaps we've not looked into as much in the past and will continue to do so into 2021. So I think for me, I would say those are kind of like the three main objectives that have changed for us.
Let me pose a more specific question to all three of you. Which sectors do you think will be ahead in 2021 and maybe into 2022 as well, and why?
I can jump in with that one. So I think we all know that there's the word tech attached to everything. So we have med tech, prop tech, insure tech, ed tech, fintech. And I think the big of all of this is just anyone that's been able to make a smart use of technology within their business is going to be ahead of the game, because that's just the way we consumers are living now. With online retail, we can now get things, delivered to our door. We've seen it happen. We've experienced it. And then I think just to add to that, also sustainability is definitely a conversation we're seeing a lot more of. And I think it's also not the fact that people are just talking about it, but it's also what our consumers are expecting from so it's an expectation that I think everybody is seeing, and companies are just responding to that now.
Marianne, do you agree?
I agree, and I think let me just add to that in a more specific way. It's true that whichever company that can smartly and quickly and be agile in terms of tapping into digital will be definitely ahead of the game. Looking at more industry specific, again, I think it's mentioned as well by Sai. Social media platforms, online marketplaces, logistic and online businesses. That's definitely on the rise. Telco and IT, they are upgrading their system like crazy so that they can actually cater to this digital need, which is really, really massive. And specifically for Indonesia, since I work here, the large growth of small medium enterprises and homegrown industry is so big in Indonesia, and it's becoming even more big with currently during COVID, because of everything is ordered online and all that. And not just marketplace, but the main platform that they use is Instagram. So they will promote, they create awareness, they will interact, engage, and everything through Instagram. That will later, it drives the traffic to the online platform here. In fact, the SME's economy or revenue is contributing 60.34% of Indonesia economy. That domestic growth rate. That's how big it is. So with that, obviously, in Indonesia, the government will definitely support to get it, to get it grow. So that's more specific for Indonesia. But I think across the globe and Southeast Asia, especially, as mentioned, whoever is fast enough, agile enough, and just quickly turn things around, and then put the current purpose related to everything that's going on would be definitely ahead of the game.
Absolutely. I think e-commerce is huge. And if I have to think back to when we had the circuit breaker in Singapore, all the online shopping I did from the comfort of my home just to cope. I'm sure I wasn't the only one. But maybe jumping back to travel and tourism, Teesta, since you work in the industry, and I'm sure a lot of people are very curious, and I guess hungry to travel. Where do you see the emerging growth opportunity and the risks we have to look out for in your industry?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I think, I want to get on a plane as much as probably a lot of people do. Adding to the lady said, I think technology is very much going to be at the forefront when it comes to an emerging trend. And I would say travel tech to that as well. So I think for me, I think the opportunity is travel will come back. The question is when and to what scale. And I think it's dependent on a lot of things, government regulations, vaccination status, just to name a few of those. So I think there's the opportunity that it will come back. The question is when. And I think to answer that question of when, I think relying on the data and facts is more important than ever. So again, an opportunity. If you can see, for example, where a potential traveler is dreaming to go, you know exactly who to target. And maybe that's not now, and that could be, say, 3 months from now or 6 months from now. But that is an opportunity. And I can give you a small example. You know, our team here in Asia Pacific did an analysis in December to see for the upcoming Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year holidays in February, where people were looking to travel. And we can tell that as early as December to see where those trends are and where that demand is coming from. Now, the reality of can people actually get on that plane, that's a different kind of hurdle and challenge. And those, again, are, as I mentioned, dependent on a lot of external factors. I think another opportunity, you know, would be kind of relying on owned media channels as opposed to only your earned media channels. I think the opportunity to take advantage of those owned ones, invest in those owned ones at a time where you're struggling to get your voice heard, when there's so much happening in the world and so much of a struggle with very different headlines that are taking over, which are perhaps more important, whether it's, you know, COVID or things happening with relation to Australian fires or the elections in the US and so on and so forth. So when you're really struggling to get in there with the press, you know, try and make the most of the channels that you can make the most of. And then I think the risk would be, don't be stagnant. I think we keep saying this to the point of like agility. The risk is if you're stagnant and stuck in your old ways and comparing back to metrics and figures from 2019, that's probably not going to get you anywhere. We have a new normal going on. And I think you should almost look at it as an opportunity of, this is a fresh page, and start afresh and develop your new metrics and develop your new standards, as opposed to comparing back to something which doesn't even make sense anymore.
Thank you. So moving on from the macro trends to maybe organizational trends. So during the crisis, we've all seen how companies are paying more attention to corporate purpose. And I think, you know, we all have brought this up already, corporate purpose as well as the importance of reputation. More senior stakeholders are realizing that PR isn't just about press release, and more about an authentic message that needs to be communicated consistently, not just with external stakeholders, but also internal. So based on a survey done by Prospect towards the end of last year, we found that client spend on agencies have increased in internal comms and social media. I know Shonali spoke before this about the importance of internal comms and how internal is the new external. So maybe this is a question for Sai and Marianne, since you both currently work in agencies. Do you see this increased demand for internal comms and social media? Do you see that it will continue?
Sai, you want to go first or me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Just before I answered, I'm looking at the chat box. There is a question. I think it's directed at me for SME question. Do you want me to answer now or later?
I think we do questions later, if you don't mind.
Okay. Okay. So I just leave it as it is. Yeah. All right. To answer to that, yes, there is definitely an increase of need for internal comm. In fact, when the COVID started, current clients then, the first thing that they ask is, how do I tell the employee what is the perimeters? How do I do this and all that? So some clients who's fast enough, you know, work with us straight away in creating all series of communication internally, and I'm not talking about just, you know, newsletters and all that, but different creative variety of stuff using social media and internal comms apps that is available now here and there, and tap into their system and start growing. It's just that I think after the first 6 months of COVID last year, people started to wanting to expand a little bit more and not just on internal. What we are hoping this year, and some clients indicating that they want to continue the internal communication. So the immediate or the emergency of needs of internal communication is actually highlighted higher than ever before. And I know that as for PR agencies, the toughest thing to sell, despite the need, is internal communications. we find it a lot easier to tell the clients that you need this now compared to the previous years. So that's the take from the agency side. But I don't know, Sai, if you want to add?
Yeah, so I would say, I think we all know this. So 2020 was a bit of a shock to everybody. So everybody just froze for a bit and tried to reevaluate what they needed. So I think some businesses have now had some time to really re-strategize and decide on what their next steps are. So we're definitely seeing some investment in social media and internal comms, but that also means as an integrated agency, we're looking at things like media training. We're looking at people looking to see how they can improve their SEO through digital marketing, or sometimes even their SEM, depending on what it is that they need. So I think it really just goes back to what that goal is, that what the client needs, what their new strategy looks like, and then what we're doing is helping to kind of package something for them that addresses the needs that they have. So if they're looking to build thought leadership, it's having like a media training to kind of help them say the right things, making sure they have the trends in hand, they have the insights they need to be able to back up their interviews whenever they have them. If they're doing op-eds, sometimes it's that content creation, like Marianne was saying, they need help with that. So it's that building content for them. And then looking at content as well, a lot of people have had time to up their website. Everybody feels like they need to improve it now. So I think that's also something we're seeing a lot of advice being given in that area as well. So I think it really is quite a lot. It's quite a big spectrum of it, but yes, a lot of it is very digitally focused, and there is more interest in the internal comm side of things. But I do think, like you said, it's not just about the press release anymore. We're looking at like hybrid events. We're looking at ways of incorporating different things. And so I think people are seeing that PR is a lot more than what they thought it was. So it's exciting. It's a new stage for all of us.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. So, I mean, data measurement, analytics, keep coming up as, one of the most important future skill sets for PR people to have. And maybe this is a question for Teesta. You work in a company that collects and sells a lot of data. So can you give us some examples of how, you use data in your work on a very practical level, and how do you actually measure success or business impact with this?
Yeah, absolutely, Amanda. Yeah, data is very precious to us. I think we use it very, very extensively, and I think it's across the board. So from our commercial sales team to the other end of the spectrum, marketing and PR, we're all using data and engaging in it in different ways. And some examples I can give you. So, as I was mentioning before, we can track seasonality trends or upcoming trends. So really looking into the future as opposed to looking into the past. That's not to say we can't looking into the past. We can do comparative analytics looking into the past. It's just that, does that necessarily make sense to do? I think another thing, we introduced as an organization, which I feel we probably would have never encountered had we not gone through the pandemic, was on our website, for example, we introduced a self-serve dashboard where you can essentially pull insights, travel trends on your own. So really empowering, the audience to be like, what can I see? What can I observe? And that's something that, as an organization, we've not done before. We've always kind of provided it, whether it's to our customers or, from my point of view, to the media, where I'm providing figures and facts, or to my agency partners and freelancers that we work with. But having the self-serve platform introduces a very new, creative way. And I think, in fact, if anything, I would say it just keeps getting revamped and keeps getting more advanced in its method for people to be able to use extensively. And I think another point would be, working with, we have a data insights team in-house who are data scientists. They are the expertise. They're skilled in that professional sphere. And I think being equipped to understand, even at a basic level, on how to read those trends and getting that training from them is really vital. I mean, if you're going to be talking about trends and insights at a broader level, you should be able to decipher what you're trying to say. So I think we've had that advantage of getting that touch point from them, and that's really helped us to measure conversations, measure return on investment, whether it's been through PR activities or virtual events and so on.
Love the concept of the dashboard that you mentioned, because I think if you give your partners the ability to co-create something with your company rather than just, you know, take information from you, I think that's quite powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, I even see that with the press across the regions that I look after. So many of them prefer to take it themselves, because then they're pulling content in an unbiased way. They're not pulling content because I'm telling them that, you know, Hong Kong is trending in travel. They're looking at it from an unbiased point of view. So that really works.
Fantastic. So on the agency side, some PR agencies have indicated that they will invest more in research, insights, and analytics. So Marianne, prior to Hill & Knowlton, I know you led the integration for Wunderman Thompson in Indonesia, focusing not only on creative, but also data, tech, influence. So maybe, you know, if you could share, in your experience, what are some useful principles or practices that maybe other PR agencies can learn from?
Okay, thank you. I think first and foremost for all agencies and not just PR, is that we have to train ourselves to be channel agnostic, meaning it doesn't matter if your background is PR, your background is digital, your background is advertising. You just have to not as a silo and bias and towards one thing. I think that's kind of key to be able to tap into the data right away. And PR, whether it be a function in corporation or agency, in the past has been quite silo and not exactly embedded within the marketing and you know the data and the other marketing mix. The trends are now have changed, obviously, that we are now more part of an integrated communication system, which is definitely the right way to do it. And while I was in Wunderman Thompson and now HNK and all that, one thing that never changed is the need of proper investment on data analytics. And when I say proper, I'll give you some key points. First of all, you need, sometimes for the sake of cost, you would rather outsource, you would rather actually engage a third party to get the data in, right? But I see it is more beneficial for us as a company agency to have your own content and data team within your company and not just a third party, because you're the one who's dealing with the client. You know exactly the pain points, you know exactly the issues. So the search for the data and analyze them are more targeted. Once if you just engage a third party, usually you get a lot of data, you read the data, but it doesn't tell you any story. It's just facts. And consumer, the way consumer behave now, their expectation towards brands and how they actually wanted to be approached, it makes us, it forces us communicators, not just agency but brands, to be more personal, understanding their issues and more relevant. So the connection need is very strong. So if you just presented data as it is, it's very dry, it's very cold, it doesn't create any emotional connection. So if you invest properly within your agency, data analytics, and then you actually analyze and create a story based on that, you are more on target with the consumer rather than for the sake of saving costs, you're doing it to third party. So that's number one. Number two is PR agency used to do everything. So one person, whatever level, is doing A to Z, right? From account management, from strategy, from implementation, you name it. Right. So the world is changing, the need is changing, and then PR is at the center of the understanding, the awareness, and the agreement that PR should be in the center of strategy. It makes the PR agencies and PR person in-house to have a strategy team working for them, because the strategy team job is when they pull the data and they understand the trends, they understand what the consumer wanted, they can create more targeted strategy for the business to achieve their goal. Because I think, you know, if you recall, we discussed about, it's not just about communication objective anymore, it's about a business objective and how communication and PR can actually push that and then get the objective actually done. So investing on strategy team, it's very important as well. And then we tend to, agencies, sometimes when we present to clients, and I'm sure most people can relate to this, we like to mention, we did a quick desktop research for your brief, right? And it is something that needs to be stopped. You can't just do desktop research anymore because you rely a lot on bias and personal opinion doing it that way, and it's not as targeted because again, consumer is actually quite more advanced these days. So data agency and digital agencies spend so much money, and even brand agency, to what they call the customer journey, CX, they call it CX and UX. And in the past, they think, oh, that belongs to a digital agency. It's not. Consumer journey, CX and UX, it's also for PR. And it's actually even more so for PR because you're trying to create stories to get you relevant to the consumer. Because of that, you need to understand their journey. You need to understand their biases. You need to understand where they're going and what they actually wanted. Now, so desktop research doesn't work anymore. But if you create a customer journey, every time you receive a brief and you do your own thing and created that movement from the consumer waking up until the consumer sleeping, you will actually be able to withdraw patterns. And that patterns is very important to decide your strategy. So investing again to people, not PR, not media background, but CX and UX is very important for agencies. And that also allows the accuracy and the inclusion of what consumer that are you actually, because if you notice with different purpose, different directions, consumers are no longer one big pile of consumer wanting the same thing. There's so many people wanting different things. So the consumer journey allows you to break them up and then be more targeted. So that's the fourth tips. And the last tip is, I think Sai also, and Teesta also mentioned in terms of dashboard. It is important for us to have a quicker, instant, online and targeted dashboard of information, whether it's for listening tools or for collecting how people are talking and all that. And it's not just the agency, but the clients as well needed it. So agencies should invest for them to be more knowledgeable when they are creating or offering service and strategy for the client. But the client should own it as well for them to actually know. Because sometimes when you know your product too well, you are biased in terms of your thinking and you're not actually listening to what the consumer is saying. The dashboard allows you to keep the balance check to remind you that what's good for me might not be good for the consumer. So if I can summarize the four things, invest on data analytics team within your team, not just a third party. Build your strategy team, beyond PR planning and media and all that. And don't depend so much on desktop research. Invest on CX and UX team. And last but not least is the dashboard and gather that information. I think that will be the four immediate needs that we need now as PR agency moving forward in the next few years. Thank you.
Thanks for that thorough answer, Marianne. So now let's move to a slightly different topic. On mental health, and I think a lot has been said earlier today. So maybe I can just ask the three of you. I mean, we've all heard how important mental health is. I'm sure during this period, it's been a challenge. So looking forward, how do you think we can all be more flexible, more adaptable, more resilient at work? How can we take care of ourselves while staying motivated and empathetic to others? I know this is a big question.
If that's all right, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you've already covered pretty thoroughly in the previous sessions, and as you rightly summarized, that it's very much here to stay and it's very important. And I think personally, I believe that as well. And it's hopefully not just a trend passing. And I don't think it should be. And I think, investing that time and investing those resources at an organizational level is really important. And I can give you some specific examples. At SOJERN, we have a partnership with a wellness app that employees have free access to, and you can engage in daily meditations or wellness sessions or even workouts, and we see the usage to be really high, which just goes to show that the more people are spending at home and the more we're flexible work-wise equals to we're working more. And I think having that introduced at an organizational level where people are very highly encouraged to download, to engage in this, at a free cost for the individual or employee works really well. It encourages you to switch off, to take that pause and step back. I think, even if you have wellness groups within the organization to encourage discussions of what people can do, even small suggestions can go a really long way. And I think it was Shonali who said, you can communicate heaps, but can you communicate with a purpose? So when you're communicating even on wellness, just keep it purposeful and meaningful to employees and what actually makes sense.
I would say, well, from my opinion over here, mental health has always been an important conversation topic, and it's always been something that we should have been paying focus on. So I'm glad to see a lot more people are able to share their voices on these kind of key topics. And honestly, for me personally, I joined Sinclair like 8.5 years ago, and it's that culture and that close-knitness between the team that really attracted me to it. And it's kind of nice to see that even now when everybody's working from home, we have little things like Friday happy hour, or if we have a new person joining the team, we have like a Q&A session about this person so everybody can get to know them a little bit better. And the other thing is, like, with the whole work from home thing now, it's also giving people that choice to do what they think is best for themselves. So if they do feel like they might have to go into the office for a day because you're going crazy at home, that option is available. But then obviously, keeping into mind what government restrictions are. So government says you stay at home, then we stay at home, but we try to make something work. So there's some kind of culture and teamness and close-knitness conversation that can happen. Sometimes it's just fun to talk about movies and what you're watching on Netflix and something like that. So it's just nice to kind of have that human element, I guess, again, because if you're not going to have it while sitting at home, especially if you live alone, having that at least with the team online is better than nothing else. So I think that other part of the choice just plays in quite nicely into that as well.
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I was just going to add on, because I know Sai opened the Singapore office for Sinclair in 2019, and then through most of 2020, due to COVID, you had to be in Hong Kong. So I'm sure it was, quite, interesting how you have to really stay connected and maintain that personal touch with your clients and team in Singapore.
Oh yeah, I'm online all the time.
Sorry, Marianne, you were going to say?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say that it's if there is such a thing, what we call a good irony was that with COVID, where everybody is isolated, corporations and employees are actually closer than ever, because suddenly the walls are not there and you are more engaged online and empathize with each other in terms of situation and all that. And mental health has been a very big agenda in many cases, in many industries, in many companies, including ACHNK and WPP as a holding company. And the creation of programs to actually manage the health and mental issues, I have to say, I've never seen as aggressive as now. It's a good thing. It's like it's like a knock on your heart, right? You got to do something. You got to fix this. And with that, in terms of so many of avenues and channels that the team can tap into, it allows also the team to actually reset. And then, because when you're so cooked up in your own issues, and then you're stuck at home and all that, there's no one that can give you a bit of a perspective. And sometimes you just need someone to listen, so your perspective will change. And with that, I think what I see the trend is, after last year, and then with kinds of, the focus on mental health, I think in the future, this will go on still. I don't think it's going to stop. The only thing is maybe it will be a less erratic and a less of new things being thrown at you can access to this, you can access to that, but more of a structured accessibility in terms of channels to actually talk about your issues. So it is a big agenda. And I think in terms of human connections, yes, we were told by the government, like Sai was saying, you stay at home, right? But how do you actually connect that? Like in the past, the town hall usually used for, update on revenue, who got promoted, new clients and all that. But now, first and foremost, the first half is always about how are you? Tell us the stories, and so we listen to employees, to share and all that, and online Friday drinks is becoming very common now. While in the past, it's a big no-no, right? So, yeah, I like the fact that humans are so adaptable to be able to make sure that they are safe. That part, I think it's definitely attest to humanity and humans. So yes, I think mental health issues is definitely going to be a big agenda, side by side with inclusion and diversity.
Great. I think we're a little bit short for time, so maybe just a last question for my panelists. Marianne mentioned earlier, it's not just about communications objectives anymore. It's about business objectives. PR people have to think, of the bigger picture. So, as they become more involved in things like company restructuring, crisis, helping a company pivot, helping companies refresh, differentiate from their competition, all of this good stuff. So how can PR people become better strategic consultants to their clients or their internal stakeholders? What kind of practices or what kind of training have been helpful? And this is a question for all.
I'm happy to jump on that one first. So
Sure.
I would say, I think we all learn better by doing things than just watching someone else do it. And so for us, what we feel has really helped is by including junior staff in the whole process of, getting a client. So what does that mean? It's in the pitch, it's in the brainstorming part, it's in the presentation, it's in the implementation, and having all of these bits put together. But once you have someone on board of it, you're more invested in the project because you're more interested to see it actually succeed, and then you get more excited to do that again. And the minute you feel like, even if you're really young and you're trying to figure out, is this something I want to do, but then you see someone else so excited because of the work that you did and you put in, you get more excited to keep doing that. So I think a good way to really get people thinking with that more strategic mindset and thing is just start them young, and start the conversation sooner rather than later. I think it's about being inclusive from the beginning and not kind of saying you're an executive, so you just pitch or you just call. It's called, you're an executive, but this is part of your career. This is what your growth is, which is why we think it's great for you to be part of the brainstorm before we even send ideas to the client, because sometimes they come up with really, really good things and things I could have never even thought about. And it's nice to get different opinions from different people in that brainstorm process as well. So yeah, I would say definitely start early. But then the other thing is also, when you have someone who's reached like a manager level or something like that, and you want them to keep growing and keep training and keep teaching and all of that, it's really about also giving them the opportunity to teach and to share whatever learnings they may have had. So I'd say something like, more related to what's just happened recently is, I'd say 2020, we had a lot of hybrid events towards the end of the year, because some people still had products they wanted to launch in market. Some people still wanted to, build certain kind of, because they had like a new tech thing that they wanted to launch. So they couldn't do it online, they couldn't do it in person. So they decided to do like an online press conference. So we've done a lot of recently. So we've had some of the managers themselves present to the team what the learnings were, how they would suggest to do things differently maybe, or why you would keep things the same, how you plan for plan A to plan F, because it's not A and B only anymore, because there's so many scenarios you could have. So yeah, it's really just about that sharing, but also empowering everybody in the company to step up.
I'd like to add on to Sai's point. It's building almost from a point, and I think quite similar to what she just mentioned, training team members to essentially be cross-functional is sort of the need of the hour, and I feel has really helped us as an organization to be more strategic and also develop better results. And I can give you a specific example with relation to the marketing team, whether traditionally the PR person would stick to doing PR, and the person who's doing SEM would stick to doing SEM, or the person doing events would stick to doing events. And I feel that cross functionality of skill sets, whether it's upskilling yourself from being part of a bigger team, looking at the bigger picture, only is advantageous to you. And I feel in a time of COVID particularly, and most people have been thrown in the deep end to be like, learn these skills. I think that's the best way you can actually learn. That would be one for me. And I think the second point of, really kind of training team members would be the access to senior leaders, particularly, women in the workplace, women in tech. That's quite comes to me from a special place. I think it's still skewed, the numbers of men and women in very C-suite level positions globally. And I think if you can have access to senior leaders to kind of understand how they got there through a very simple mentorship program, and even an offline mentorship program, which is not formal, where you're checking in once a quarter and having a coffee or a drink on a Friday virtually, it really does, you learn from a person's experience and how they got there, and get your questions answered in an informal scenario. That's really worked for us.
I think to add to that, one big lesson for us here, because we launched HNK Indonesia, plan was, December 2019, we're going to launch it in January. And then COVID happened, right? And we were like, oh my God, we are about to launch a country office here. Then in April, we decided to continue, and then April we launched. And we launched virtually. There was nothing, right? And it was definitely an experience that I'll never forget. But after the launch, we sat down, okay, now what? Because we can't go out, we can't sell. So the team, and at that time it was still a very small team. We've grown quite fast within 1 year, but it was a small team. We were thinking we need to survive it. We just launched it. It is globally announced. We can't just, and then, oh, we're going to wait until COVID passes, because we didn't know what happened then. So the team from me to the youngest team, we were forced to just, learn new things. And as I was saying, right, you're learning by doing, and we just have to just keep on moving, because by that time we already have clients. So we just keep doing and doing and doing, until to the point what I didn't realize is the younger ones actually leading a lot of things, and then the older one was supporting and giving approvals. And I think that the point that I got to realize was, because we were looking for a different way of measuring the work. Again, digital, hybrid events and all that, it requires different kinds of measuring. And we didn't want to use the old one, because we want to be a little bit different. And the old one of them is me. And we were like, kept thinking, how, right? And we're stuck in this thinking, because once you're doing the job for the last 25 years, you're stuck in your ways. It turns the youngest team of my team that actually leading a tech account, one of us, actually the second biggest tech account in Oregon. He came out with so we call it sentiment matrix, and he was explaining to them. So here we are, the older ones, trying to figure it out, and the young one just comes in, voila, it's done. So I was very impressed, but that is teaching us a lot in terms of, yes, maturity is needed, seniority is needed, but the young one has this creativity, infinite, that we just can't tap into that. So Sai and Teesta was definitely making a very good point. When we put everyone together, different things, and just throw different ideas, it really opens up a lot of doors, COVID or no COVID. So that was a big lesson for us.
Fantastic. And on that note, I think we have to wrap up, but thank you so much, Sai, Teesta, and Marianne. I think we had a really great, vibrant discussion. We covered a lot. We didn't get to cover all our questions, but I think we definitely had a good discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry, question. The questions, what do we do with the questions? I just don't want to leave people hanging.
Yes,
there were a lot of questions I can see.
Yes, Marianne. So what Tara will do, that's PRCA, is that she'll take them all down and then we'll make sure that it's given to the panelists. So the people who have asked the questions, thank you very much. We'll make sure that you get the answers to them. So that brings us to the end of this session. I want to thank all of you for attending. I think it was a record attendance today. In conclusion, I've picked up so many points. Purpose is important, whether it's internal or external, as more CEOs focus on corporate reputation. And the key is business outcomes. The human connection is key. And with Southeast Asia on the rise, it's important to understand different cultures. Mental health is setting the tone from the top. Tech data and management and measurement outcomes are important. With MarTech, GovTech, and everything tech, what are the opportunities? I can see lots of them here. Co-creating, somebody brought up the idea that dashboard is more collaborative. How true and interesting insight. Skills, we all have to be channel agnostic. I think that for me, it was a lot of takeaways, and I'm so excited about so many ideas to think about. It's a great way to launch in 2021. So with that, thank you all for staying with us, and get tuned into PRCA.